Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the Linux System Administrator Roadmap 2026, Part 1, The Landscape. We're going to unpack the reality of the 2026 U.S. job market for Linux professionals and, honestly, show you exactly where the real money is hiding. If you've been wondering, whether a career in system administration is actually still worth your time, or if the cloud has just completely eaten the industry, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to look closely at the data, cut through all the noise, and map out what your next career move should really be.
So let's just rip the Band-Aid off and start with a blunt truth straight from the data. The traditional system administrator job title, it's actually projected to shrink over the long term here in the US. I know, hearing that right out of the gate might sound a bit discouraging, especially if that's the exact title you've been gunning for. It kind of sounds like the end of an era, right?
And hey, if you're just looking at surface-level job boards, typing in those exact words, it might honestly seem like the entire career path is evaporating right before your eyes. The title is disappearing. You're going to see fewer and fewer listings for that classic, old-school sysadmin who just sits in a dark server room all day. The title itself is undeniably fading away from modern HR departments.
But wait, here is the massive reality check that completely flips the script. Despite that old job title declining, Linux-specific job postings still grew by an absolutely incredible 18% year-over-year in 2025 across the United States. That's huge. That is not a dying field. That is a rapidly accelerating market. The demand is surging, but employers are just calling it something else now.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that while the old title is disappearing, the skill is exploding. The tech industry hasn't moved on from Linux at all. Actually, scratch that. They've doubled down on it. It's literally the exact opposite of a disappearing act. The core competencies of managing Linux environments are more highly valued right now than ever before in the history of tech.
Those traditional admin responsibilities haven't just vanished into thin air. They've been redistributed into much higher-paying modern roles. We're talking about DevOps, cloud operations, and platform engineering. These are the roles commanding those premium U.S. salaries right now. Companies don't want a traditional sysadmin anymore. They want a cloud engineer who breathes Linux, or a DevOps specialist who can script a Linux environment in their sleep. The skills just got a brand new, highly lucrative wrapper.
Section 1. Why Linux runs everything, the unseen foundation. We really need to understand the why behind this massive demand, so you can position yourself perfectly in the current landscape.
It's wild how Linux underpins the vast majority of all cloud infrastructure, bare metal servers, and containerized systems today. Now let's hit the pause button for a quick reality check. You constantly hear people say, oh, everything is in the cloud now, servers don't matter. That is probably the biggest misconception in modern tech. The cloud is literally just someone else's massive data center, and I guarantee you, those millions of servers, they're running Linux. Whether it's a bare metal machine in a local closet or a sprawling containerized cluster in AWS, Linux is the operating system driving the pulse of the internet. Because of this massive market share, learning Linux is emphatically not a dead-end job title. It's your foundation. It's the essential springboard to advanced, lucrative engineering roles. Think about it. If you jump into tech trying to learn advanced cloud automation without knowing how the underlying Linux operating system works, you are basically building a house on sand. Mastering this foundation is exactly what gives you the leverage to climb the ladder later on.
And because of that strong foundation, your Linux skills transfer directly and immediately into these rapidly growing, highly lucrative engineering fields. DevOps, cloud engineering, and platform roles lean heavily on core Linux knowledge. When you know how to troubleshoot a kernel panic, manage system processes, or configure secure networking at the command line, you are literally doing the core work required by every single one of these advanced roles.
But let's pause for a second and ask the million-dollar question. So what's the actual difference? If they all rely on Linux, what actually separates these high-paying jobs from each other? If the core operating system is exactly the same across the board, why does a platform engineer make a different salary or do a different daily routine than a cloud operations specialist?
Section 2. Admin versus DevOps versus CloudOps, mapping the overlap. Let's figure out exactly which path aligns with your specific career goals in the 2026 market. Let's break down the primary focus of each role. A Linux admin focuses on keeping core infrastructure running smoothly, patching, backing up, and troubleshooting individual machines. Moving over to DevOps, the focus shifts to automating software delivery, using Linux to build pipelines that get code from a developer's laptop to production instantly.
And finally, CloudOps focuses on managing scalable, distributed environments, making sure that when a website goes viral, those Linux servers automatically duplicate themselves to handle the massive traffic.
When we compare them directly, the core difference really boils down to the shift from manual maintenance to automated scale. The traditional admin might SSH into one single server to fix a problem. But the DevOps or CloudOps engineer, they write a script that fixes that problem across 10,000 servers simultaneously. That shift from manual, one-off effort to automated global orchestration is exactly where those massive US salary bumps come from.
So, to successfully navigate this evolution yourself, you've got to follow a specific path. Step 1, master the Linux core. You absolutely cannot skip this. Then, step 2, add cloud and DevOps automation tools. You learn how to automate what you already know how to do manually. And that directly leads to step 3, securing those higher US salary roles in a market that is just absolutely desperate for people who actually understand how these systems work under the hood.
Because no matter which specific advanced path you decide to walk down, deep Linux mastery remains the non-negotiable common prerequisite. It really doesn't matter if you want to be a Kubernetes wizard, an AWS architect, or a cybersecurity expert. Linux mastery is the common prerequisite for them all. It's the shared language of the entire modern technology stack.
Section 3. The 6-figure T's. Preparing for Part 2. Okay, so you know the landscape, you know the titles have changed, and you know this foundational skill is absolutely booming. But how do you actually prove to top-tier US employers that you possess this foundational mastery? How do you actually get past those resume screeners?
Well, in Part 2 of this Explainer series, we're going to cover the exact certification path that turns this foundational Linux skill into a secure 6-figure career. We'll look at the specific credentials that carry real weight in 2026. The demand is clearly there. I mean, that 18% growth proves it for sure. So what's your next move going to be? Make sure to stick around, and I'll see you in Part 2.
Welcome back to the Explainer. So, you remember in Part 1 how we really dug into how the traditional sysadmin role is basically morphing into something way more dynamic? We pivoted our focus toward the reality of DevOps and CloudOps. Well, today, we are taking that foundational understanding and we are making it completely actionable. Today, we are breaking down the exact certification path that is going to get you there. Because knowing you need to learn cloud operations is one thing, right? But knowing the precise step-by-step credentials that hiring managers in the United States are actually looking for, that's what will actually get you hired. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, climbing the Red Hat ladder, and that 4-step progression. You know, Red Hat isn't just another vendor out there. In a lot of massive enterprise environments, they are literally the gold standard. Mastering their ecosystem gives you a huge advantage, and this certification path acts kind of like a sequential tech tree to level up your career. It's a very clear 4-step progression, starting at the RHCSA, moving to the RHCE, specializing, and finally hitting the architect level. It takes all the guesswork out of figuring out what to study next. The whole journey kicks off with the RHCSA, that's the Red Hat Certified System Administrator. Now, don't let the entry point label fool you. This is rigorous. It demands a solid 3 to 6 months of really dedicated study. Actually, let me be super clear about this. This is not a weekend cram session kind of deal. It requires daily practice because it's forming the absolute bedrock for everything else you're going to learn. And yeah, that level of commitment, it's going to hit your wallet too. The exam itself is a $500 investment. I know, dropping $500 on a test feels incredibly steep when you're just trying to break into the industry. But you really have to view this through the lens of return on investment. So let's look at the financial return on that upfront cost. Because the second you pass, the starting salary for an RHCSA in the US immediately jumps right into the $75,000 to $105,000 range. Suddenly, that initial $500 exam fee starts looking a whole lot like the best strategic career move you could possibly make, doesn't it? You're officially on the board, earning a highly competitive technical salary. Let's move on to Section 2, Mastering Automation and Advancing to the RHCE. Okay, so you've got your RHCSA, the money is good. But what happens when you're tasked with automating these massive cloud systems? Because in modern DevOps, you are never just managing one single server. You're managing fleets of them. That is exactly where you level up to the Red Hat Certified Engineer, or RHCE. This shifts your focus heavily toward automation. You stop typing commands into a single machine, and you start writing code and playbooks to configure thousands of machines all at once. You become an engineer of the system rather than just an administrator. And here is where it gets really interesting. According to the data from our sources,
Adding that RHCE to your resume yields a massive 15 to 20% salary premium compared to holding just the RHCSA alone. Companies are incredibly eager to pay premium for professionals who can automate tasks, cut down on human error, and scale up operations efficiently. To put that into hard numbers, this automation premium pushes your expected earning bracket right up into the $100,000 to $130,000 range. Stopping at the first tier honestly just leaves a lot of opportunity on the table. Automation is the engine of modern IT, for sure, and the RHCE proves you know exactly how to drive it. But you don't stop there. After conquering the RHCE, you branch out into specialist certifications. These focus on modern infrastructure tools. We're talking containers, we're talking advanced Ansible automation. This is where you really tailor your expertise. You're taking your automation foundation and applying it directly to the cutting-edge, containerized environments that power today's largest apps. And all of those specialist skills, they are building toward the absolute pinnacle of this whole path. The Red Hat Certified Architect, or RHCA. This is the top-tier master level of the Red Hat certification ecosystem. At this point, you aren't just deploying systems anymore. You are literally designing the architecture from the ground up. It's a seriously elite status in the IT world. And as you might guess, hitting that architect level unlocks the absolute highest compensation tier. We are easily pushing past the $150,000 mark here. Organizations completely rely on RHCAs to make those critical infrastructure decisions that keep their entire business running securely. It's a long journey, sure, but the data clearly shows the financial destination is pretty spectacular. Okay, actually, hold on. Let's hit pause for just a second. Before we get totally lost in those 150K dreams, what if you are starting from absolute zero? Like, what if all this talk about automation and enterprise architecture just feels miles away because you're still just trying to figure out the basic command line? That brings us to Section 3, the crossroads, doing an entry-level reality check. Look, if you aren't quite ready to commit $500 and 6 months of your life to Red Hat right out of the gate, you're at a crossroads. And honestly, that's a perfectly fine place to be. You have to start where you are. Our sources compare two main entry-level options side by side, the vendor-neutral CompTIA Linux Plus against the vendor-specific RHCSA. Let's walk through both, because making the right choice here really dictates the trajectory of your first year in tech. So the CompTIA Linux Plus is a really fantastic vendor-neutral starting point if you just want to grasp the core concepts without tying yourself to one specific corporate ecosystem right away. It gives you that broad foundation. It's largely knowledge-based, testing your understanding of the concepts, which is great for building up initial confidence if you're a total beginner. On the flip side, the RHCSA is completely performance-based, and yeah, it is significantly harder. You aren't just clicking multiple choice answers. You're dropped into a live system environment and told to execute tasks and fix problems on a timer. It is a trial by fire, but that is exactly why it offers such incredible credibility. Hiring managers know that if you passed it, you can actually do the job. Ultimately, neither certification is universally superior. It impartially comes down to your current experience level and how ready you are to dive deep. Need a gentler on-ramp to learn the vocabulary? Go Linux Plus. Ready for the deep end and want to prove your practical chops to the enterprise world? Go RHCSA. Which leads us to our final section. Hands-on skills, reality check, looking ahead. All right, so now you know the roadmap. You've got the sequence, the costs, the ROI, but I really need to emphasize something absolutely crucial here. Passing a multiple choice or practical test doesn't automatically make you a highly effective sysadmin in a messy real-world corporate environment. A piece of paper gets you past the HR filter, but your actual hands-on ability is what keeps you in the room. So here's my question for you. Are you just chasing the paper, or are you actually ready to build the real skills? Think about that. To leave you with a final thought directly from our sources. In Part 3, we're covering the realistic timeline and the exact hands-on skills that matter way more than any certificate. You absolutely will not want to miss that. Catch you next time.